Welcome everybody here today. Copies of the current Balch column listing programs and other events is available on the table in the back. I'd also like to mention that we are having a genealogical seminar here later this month. And it's on Wednesday, the 20th of March. Judy Russell, who is an attorney, is going to be talking about the legal aspects of genetic genealogy. If you'd like to pre-register, it's better if you pre-register because there is a fee and it's less expensive if you pre-register. If you show up at the door, it's more expensive. So just please throw the applications are on the back of the table. So water fountain, for those who don't know, is to the left, out the back door. The restrooms are straight back. And if you have any kind of an electronic device, if you would at this time, you would please turn off or mute. Everyone would be appreciative. I'd like for you to remember that there is a virtual audience in addition to those of you who are here in person, and it is being recorded and will be published on the library's YouTube. The link will be made available to those who have registered for the class and have provided us with an email. Those of you who are attending virtually may ask questions by posting in the chat box. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest speaker, Jana Shafagoj, Director of Preservation and History of Morven Park. Jana has over 25 years experience in researching, documenting, and restoring historic buildings in Virginia and abroad. She holds an MA in Archaeology and Historic Buildings from the University of York in England and a BA in Historic Preservation from Mary Washington College. Please welcome me and please join me in welcoming Jana.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Alexandra, and thank you everyone for joining the program today, both in person and online. I'm so pleased to be here with you all this morning, and I'm hoping that you, like me, love old houses and are interested in learning more. Today, we're going to have some fun learning about different domestic architectural styles. Oh, where do I
click on this screen and click the PowerPoint to wake it up? And then click.
Yay, okay. All right, I am a professional architectural historian and preservationist. My love of old houses comes from my belief that houses, more than any other artifact or structure, convey, sorry, I thought I silenced my phone. It's not well. So buildings, more than any other artifact or structure, convey almost unlimited information about the occupants and the societies that built and then later remodeled or renovated them. Buildings can tell a lot of different stories. You just need to know how to speak the language. Old buildings are historic artifacts. At the most basic level, they were created at a point in the past to serve the defined purpose of providing shelter. But as we know, they're designed to do so much more than just that. They convey status, they provide comfort, and how we define comfort changes as we move through the generations. And they shape our interactions with both those residing within our households and those from outside, including formal and informal visitors. When someone like me is called out to look at a property and determine its history, we're really looking at three components of each building. We're looking at its architectural style, its construction materials, and its spatial arrangement. So architectural styles are organized into typologies. These typologies have been assembled over time through the careful study of existing buildings and corresponding archival documents. Each style typology is defined by certain elements and will be assigned a general date range for when they would be built. For example, a Georgian house in Virginia could have been constructed at any time between 1700 and 1800. To narrow down a date range, construction materials and the way the space is assembled within the house is also examined. I could build a Georgian style house tomorrow, but I probably would not pay the extra money to have someone cut logs and shape them for framing by hand, nor have hand cut nails produced, right? We're not going to go to that expense to fake it. I would also probably have a more modern arrangement of space inside the home based on our current social expectations of how a home should be designed. And this up here is a drawing of pit sawn timbering. So this is pretty much what it sounds like. You've got a saw, a guy holds it at the top. Whoever is not the favorite holds it at the bottom with all the sawdust, and they saw through the log that way. Now, when I talk about spatial arrangement, a good way to think about space and its changes is looking at the kitchen in houses. So the kitchen has really changed in its placement of houses within the last 50 years, probably more like 60 now. We've seen a tremendous movement. So the kitchen has really shifted from a room near the back of the house where it's kind of secluded and cut off from other rooms to really being integral, right in the center of the house, kind of the heart of the house where all the social entertaining is done. Now this is a really interesting shift to me because the reason it used to be this way is because kitchens produce smells and odors and grease and things like that. And so having it secluded at the back of the house made a lot of sense, so you wouldn't get those cooking smells throughout the house. But we as a society have been like, no, we want everyone to gather together in the kitchen, feed and cook together. So it's this social change that our society has gone through. And in fact, large kitchens are making other rooms, such as your formal living rooms and formal dining rooms, which used to be really important to houses, obsolete. And a lot of those spaces are missing from modern middle-class family homes today. So in today's presentation, I hope to give you the skills to really identify a home's architectural style. That's what we'll be focusing on today. And the information about how that style came into being, what forces kind of led to that development. And I'm hoping you can use this information to impress your friends the next time you walk through downtown Leesburg. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. All right, the first style we're going to talk about today is the Georgian architectural style. And here's a real typical little Georgian house. To understand the Georgian style and how it developed, we have to go all the way back to 1666, the year that London went up in flames during the Great Fire. The fire lasted for 4 days and destroyed roughly 80% of the city of London and left over 80,000 people homeless. Although the recorded death toll is surprisingly very low, the devastation to the city is hard to comprehend. The London that burned was composed of thousands of medieval timber frame buildings with thatched roofs. And these buildings were tightly packed together in the city with upper stories jutting out over the city streets. So it's really easy to understand how the fire spreads so easily and so quickly when you have buildings like this. This is a photograph of the Shambles up in York. If you ever go over to England, it's worth the train ride up to York. York went through a period of kind of a financial depression for numerous decades throughout the 19th and 20th centuries until it became a tourist attraction. When a city is poor, it saves all of its old buildings because there's no money for rebuilding. There's no new retail shops coming in wanting to demo and rebuild. So York contains its city walls and most of its medieval buildings, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so London looked kind of like this before it burned. Now, the following year after the Great Fire of London in 1667, the London Rebuilding Act was passed, and that established construction codes for buildings in London. And those construction codes were adapted throughout cities in England, right? Because nobody really wanted to burn like London had. So these codes required new construction to be of brick or stone rather than timbering, and restricted the buildings to their property lines. So no more second stories jutting out over the street. So this act set the stage for some of the key stylistic features of what we call Georgian domestic architecture today. Now, at the same time all of this was going on, Sir Christopher Wren, the architect for St. Paul's Cathedral, proposed rebuilding London as a Renaissance city filled with classical architecture. The classical architecture Wren envisioned was strongly influenced by the work of an Italian Renaissance architect, Andrea Palladio, who in turn was influenced by the architecture of ancient Rome. Palladio's study on architecture and city planning was summarized in his very popular book, The Four Books of Architecture, published in 1570 and translated into numerous European languages. In his books, Palladio's buildings demonstrate the incorporation of mathematical-based order and symmetry in both the interior plan and the exterior facade. The first of Palladio's 4 books of architecture were translated into English and published in 1663, just 3 years before the fire. The entire series was published in English by 1720. So Wren is using the symmetry and mathematical equations documented by Palladio within his designs, okay, when he's designed St. Paul's. Although Wren never got the Renaissance inspired London he hoped for, English colonists in America were aware of his arguments, what he was envisioning, and of Palladio's work. In 1695, construction of the Sir Christopher Wren building is started at William and Mary. Looking at this building, I don't think any of us would immediately proclaim it as an example of Italian Renaissance architecture, but Wren and Palladio's Renaissance concept are there. The building has a symmetrical, balanced facade. It's very even looking at the front of it. And the arrangement of interior space on the main floor was balanced as well. All these concepts are translated into our common domestic architecture, becoming what we know of as the Georgian style. So as I said earlier, the Georgian style generally dates from 1700 to 1800 here in Virginia. Your classic Georgian style house looks like the house we all draw as children, right? It's typically 2, maybe 2.5 stories in height, and it's 5 bays wide. So a bay is a section kind of with a window. So you see we've got those 5 bays going across. And it always has a central door. Let me see, where did I lost myself. Okay, it has a central door, and that central door opens onto a hall that runs from front to back and has a door behind going out the back. And that's known as a central passage. And then the rooms are balanced, arranged on either side of it. Okay, so that's that exterior balance and symmetry, and interior as well. Exterior ornamentation on the building may include coins. This one does not have coins, but another one does. Cornices with dentils. So dentils, think teeth. Right? So if the cornice looks like it has teeth, it's a dental cornice. Paneled doors, sometimes in classical surrounds, and windows that are aligned both vertically and horizontally. Everything that symmetry is most important. And you'll see in Georgian buildings, if they retain their original windows, they have multiple panes of glass, a lot of little small panes of glass. And then brick buildings typically have water tables, which is kind of marking where the foundation is. So here's this building's water table, and bell horses, which kind of mark where that second story is. So, and these are coins. I mentioned that coin math later. Those are called coins.
And were coins used for aesthetic reasons, or was it a kind of a structural reinforcement?
Coins are completely aesthetic.
Oh, okay.
Yep, you don't need to have them, but they look fancy. And you pay more for them, right? So you are fancy. So the Georgian style is still really popular today. This is kind of like our traditional American home. My neighborhood, which was built in 2005, has houses with symmetrical 5-bay fronts and central passages. That's why I picked my house, because it's got that Georgian interior layout. So this really is, when we as Americans think about a typical home, this is what we picture. All right, any questions about Georgian style before I move on to the next one? Yeah.
Was it King George that it was named after, or?
Yes, Georgian style comes from King George.
Okay, and another question, this looks like, was Christopher Wren involved in, architecture in Bath, England?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure.
It looks similar to.
Yeah, it's
Bath.
definitely, everybody's kind of doing the same thing, you know, it cracks me up. A lot of people in my field talk about how HGTV is ruining, you know, American design, because we're all watching TV and doing the same thing. We've always done that, you know, it wasn't as easily consumable. You had to go buy books or, you know, magazines, but we've always done that, which is why we have typologies. Any other questions? Yeah.
I would have referred to this as a center hall colonial.
Mm-hmm. What period?
Yeah.
Yeah, 1700 to 1800. So, yeah, technically, this is a Georgian, but Georgian is defined by having that central hall and it's typically built in that colonial period. So we're saying the same thing with two different words.
Probably as a real estate, I'm not a real estate person, but that's how it would be
Mm,
described more as.
yeah, no, I'm good with that. Makes
Me
sense.
too. I'm happy with the Georgian.
And, you know, you can use both, right?
And Leesburg was originally called Georgetown, right?
Yes, yes.
The front entry is plain, it's very simple, unadorned. At what point in the Georgian style, can front entry get more emphasis?
Oh, we're gonna talk about that in a second. So
Moldings and.
yeah, so when we think about buildings, it's very, very rare, and the question for those online was about when a door surroundings get more elaborate, and we are going to go into that. But if you have a house that was built from 1750, chances are other people did stuff to it too.
Yeah.
So it's really rare to find a building in pristine, original condition unless it's like a historic site that somebody's gone in and stripped later additions and restored it to its original appearance. So we will talk about how some of those surrounds come into play soon. Okay, all right, well, keep moving on. So next up is the federal style. So the federal style of architecture is popular from about 1780 to 1820. And it's really an outgrowth of the Georgian style, but you know, we fought the revolution, so we don't want to call it Georgian anymore, right? So it's developed during the time of history known as the federal period in American history, hence the name. So architects Robert Adam in England and Asher Benjamin in the USA are really the people who define this style. Like Sir Christopher Wren, both Adam and Benjamin are inspired by the works of Palladio. Like the Georgian style, which is overlapping with this style for roughly 20 years, symmetry and proportion continue to be defining characteristics. Both the federal style, but the federal style has more emphasis on windows. Okay, so looking at this, remember we talked about Georgian houses being 5 bays. We have those 5 bays. We have that central hall passage. And we have that importance of symmetry, both horizontally and vertically. But like I said, the windows are a little different. There's more emphasis on windows. So the best way to distinguish if a house is Georgian or federal is to look for a fan light over the door. That makes it federal, that simple little fan light. Usually with the fan light, you'll also have side lights. You don't have to, but they come along. And then if it's true fancy federal, you have a Palladian window, which is this 3-part window, usually above that entrance door. And all that is down to the fact that here in the US, we are making advances in the American glassmaking industry. And so this is allowing us to create larger panes of glass at lower prices. So not only do we have those Palladian 3-part windows, but we also begin to see 6 light windows rather than 9 lights of the pre-Revolutionary War. So if we look at this, when I say 6 light or 9 lights, that's the number of panes. So see, this upper sash has 9 panes of glass and the lower sash has 9 panes. So this would be a 9/9 window, with sash window, 9/9. Same with here. As we go into Georgian, I don't think this house has the original windows, but we'll pretend it does. You have 6/6 with sash windows, okay? Because those panes of glass can be larger. Let's see. So glass making is picking up and we're going to have bigger panes of glass. And then there's also a shift in preferred ornamentation. So the Georgian style has dentils in the cornice and panels in the fireplace surround. So this is a Georgian interior. You can see the square rectangular paneling, the dentils, okay, again, think of teeth, those dentils. And then as you move into the federal style, it softens. So the federal style uses swags, urns, and ovals. So the ornament is softer and rounder. We still have the dentils, but see, we have these ovals here instead. So that makes it federal. Okay, so here is the building, looks very Georgian, but because it's got its little fan light over the door, it is federal. So again, Georgian and Federal are both symmetrical, balanced, and very similar. And that giveaway is the fan light over the front door or your Palladian window above the front door. Any questions about Federal?
Yeah, the picture right before it, this with the staircase on both sides, is that characteristic of Federal? Is that something added later?
That's, that could be added at any time. So you'll see it in Georgian, you'll see it in Federal, you'll see it going up through the 19th century. Again, it's a status symbol. It's something a little more prestigious. And you've got this raised, you know, it's necessary if you've got a raised cellar. I don't know, I just pulled this off online, so I'm not sure where it's from. But if you're
That in Savannah, Georgia.
that's what I was thinking too. If you can't dig a foundation very deep, or you need to have your cellar exposed, right, you need to have a fancy staircase. Something like this is far more graceful and elegant. It does have the curving, which speaks a little bit more to Federal. Georgian can have that straight up and down. Yeah, but it could really fit with either style. Any other questions? All right. Okay, now on to one of our favorites at Morven Park, the Greek Revival. So Greek Revival style is really popular here in the United States from about 1820 until 1860. So you'll see all these styles kind of overlap, and you know, nobody's going to stop you in 1850 from building a Georgian house. But like I said, we do get advancements in other materials and things like that that help us distinguish. So anyway, Greek Revival style, popular from 1820 until around 1860. And the style is inspired in part by contemporary archaeological excavations in Greece, and it's directly referencing the architecture of ancient Greece. So when you see it, it wants you to think ancient Greek. So why are we Americans, who are creating a brand new nation at this time, building in the architectural style from 1,000 years ago? Anyone want to guess?
Because we can.
Well, yeah, obviously. No king's gonna tell us what to do. Any other guesses?
Materials?
Materials, yeah, we do have, but there's really no difference in the materials that we're using before or after. So the reason we're doing Greek Revival is tied to our American history. So by 1820, when this style is starting to appear throughout the United States, we Americans are feeling really pleased with ourselves. So we have beat the British, a world superpower, not just during the Revolution, but then when they came back for more in the War of 1812, right? And according to our history books, we beat them in 1812. The Brits tell a totally different story of the War of 1812, but hey, our history, we win. So we have embarked on the creation of a brand new democratic government by the people, for the people. And this is a really big deal. And we're declaring that our country will be the next great democracy the world has ever seen. What's the first? Greece, ancient Greece, right? They're saying ancient Greece was the first great democracy. We are the next great democracy the world's ever seen. This is the age of reason. So we are going to have a democratic government with the wisdom of ancient Greece, but without the barbarism or pagan religion, which our founding fathers argued led to the fall of ancient Greece and Rome. So we're going to take the good and ignore the rest of that. And so the ideal streetscape of our new republic would evoke the classical rolling pastoral hills dotted with neat temples and tiny groves, and town streets lined with porticos and arcades and dotted with statues honoring civic heroes. So this was kind of the vision of what America should look like as a democracy, what our city should look like. So the Greek Revival style is directly alluding to the literary or historic ideas of classical antiquity: democracy, liberty, republican government, and civic virtue. All right. So this is why our government buildings are built in this Greek Revival style. From our Capitol building and the presidential White House in DC to our state and even our local government buildings, the Greek Revival style is proclaiming this idea and promise of American democracy. Never mind, that was only the rich white guys who had any say in it. You know, we're working there. So when it comes to Morven Park, Morven Park was owned by a wealthy lawyer from Alexandria named Thomas Swan. He began acquiring acreage that became Morven Park in 1800. This man is living in Alexandria and Washington, D.C., and coming out to the plantation he owns here in Loudon for the summer months, okay? Thomas Swan is friends with many of our founding fathers, including Jefferson and Monroe. And he's appointed Attorney General of Washington, D.C. in 1821 by President Monroe. Okay, so he's tied in with all the big boys. So as I said, he begins acquiring land in Loudon in 1800, and he actually built a respectable Georgian house in 1800. That was his first house on the property. And then by 1820, as a result of accumulating wealth and a growing family, Swan, like many other Americans, decides what his home is really missing is a Greek Revival portico. A large, gleaming white, well-proportioned portico will not only proclaim his support and his belief in the American Republic, but will also announce that he is a virtuous citizen of this new republic. Okay, so Morven Park's transformation from a typical Georgian house into an iconic Greek Revival mansion took place around 1825 and was definitely completed by 1830. We have a visitor that talks about it in 1830, right, records it in a journal. So the portico had to be the full height of Swan's 2.5-story house. So in the heart of the mansion, if you've ever been to Morven Park and been in the room with the tapestries, you're standing in the little old Georgian house. So it's right in the center of the current mansion, and it's 2.5 stories in height. Swan needed his portico to reach that full height of the gable end of his Georgian house. And in order to make the proportions right, he had to have it extend wider than the existing house. So here is our little Georgian house. That wasn't so low, it was 2.5 stories, it's a decent size here. And then the portico comes along. To reach that height, it has to go wider than the existing house. No worries, Swan builds 9-foot wings, stone in the front, wood framing in the back, not a good construction technique at all. Here and here, we have a portion of that 9-foot wing that got extended back here. Okay, just to hold up his portico. A little bit of ego. Swan also built 2-story houses on either side of the central block, and they were connected to the central block with a colonnade. So this 2-story section here and this 2-story section here were originally a little smaller, about down to here, and then there were colonnades that ran from here to here, columned colonnades, okay? So that was kind of what his house looked like by 1830. So Swan's not the only influential person in Loudon building in the Greek Revival. Around the same time that Swan was transforming his Loudon home into Greek Revival mansion, President Monroe was building Oak Hill out on 15, another Greek Revival estate. Now, not every virtuous citizen can afford to construct a massive portico. So if you did not have the finances or available credit of Thomas Swan, you could still let your house proclaim your support by adding a small portico to your front door, or even flat pilasters and a pediment. So here you see this house that was built in the Greek Revival. It's got a small little Greek Revival piece there, and it's also the gable end. So unlike Georgian and Federal, where you were looking at the side of the roof, this one you're looking at the gable end. Let's see. Although the portico or pediment on smaller houses is the hallmark of the style. So on this one, you can see somebody just added that little tiny portico. And you see this a lot. If you walk downtown, you'll see this element added to a lot of houses. It was really easy to add to a Georgian or a Federal style house. You just pop this on the front and voila, you are Greek Revival. So, but in addition to this, if we're looking at what a Greek Revival, like what the standards are for it, so symmetry continues to be important, okay? It's still that the influence by Palladio, we're still looking at symmetry and balance. So we still, this is a 3-bay house, but very symmetrical up and down. Gable front, if it was built as a Greek Revival, you will always have that gable front. You also have low pitched roofs. So instead of the roof being like this, it's a little wider, like you can see here. You will have usually rectangular transoms with side lights, but you could have a Federal too, like the fan light. But if you're building in Greek Revival, you usually go for the rectangular. You have heavy cornices, so the bit right below the roof line will be really thick and heavy. Tall first floor windows, so see how these are shorter and these are bigger. It's also that way at Morven Park. Front or corner pilasters. So these, when you have columns that are kind of flat and against the wall, they're called pilasters. So you can see them at the corners there. And then, of course, if you can afford it, your nice big portico. And then exteriors were often painted white and intimate to copy the white marble of ancient Greek buildings. And sometimes buildings were stuccoed and then scored to imitate coarse ashlar. So if you've ever been to Mount Vernon, that's a much earlier building, but it's got that coarse ashlar finish in the stucco. So, and if you're building a classical Greek temple front home, you get to choose. Do you want Doric, Ionic, or Corinthian for your columns? So simple, which is more what the Doric is what Morven Park has, to your fanciest, which is the Corinthian. Okay, so any questions about Greek revival? Yeah.
The balconies on the sides, are they typical of Greek revival, or is that only Morven Park, or how often do you see that?
So, you don't. So the balconies on the side of Morven Park were added later, as was the upstairs balcony. So with the original Greek revival, you wouldn't have had those. Now, as you're in more southern climes, depending on how the airflow moves through the house, you may have side porches or sleeping porches to capture breezes in the summer. But you don't see that usually in Greek revival here in Loudoun County. Any other questions?
So, question.
Yeah.
These columns that we're seeing, what are they made out of? Is that wood? That can't be stone, can it be?
So it depends on the property. For Morven Park, we actually have a stone quarry on site that was used to build the house, and our columns are stone and chunks of not properly fired brick with some metal banding kind of holding it all together, and then they're stuccoed. They're massive, like you cannot, this is a question for those at home, what are the columns made out of? So you can't really wrap your arms around them. So that's what they're made out of. They could be made out of wood. So it's really whatever material somebody wants, but it is with stones, you know, the random rubble pulled from Morven Park, they're just chipping off the stones to kind of round it, and then really using that stucco to finish it off and create that nice rounded edge. Yeah.
Where is the location of the old stone quarry at Morven Park?
So you can only get to it in the winter months when the undergrowth has died off. If you're familiar with Morven Park, and this is a question about where the stone quarry was located, we have our main parking lot, and then there's a little road that comes off the main parking lot up and around that's for staff and maintenance vehicles only, and there's a bunch of woods. If you kind of head off from the top corner of that road diagonally through the woods, you'll eventually come to where part of the ridge has been pulled away. And years ago, the county archaeologist and I walked the site, and we happened to discover that old stone quarry. So we believe a lot of the stone, Morven Park, the mansion is built of brick for the Georgian house, stone, and wood. So we've got a wide array of materials inside of it.
So it's not really about Greek revival, but Lauren Murphy, who's the town preservation planner, she has to leave early, but she's curious how many of the folks that are here today live in the historic district of Leesburg.
It's like 4.
4 people, and then it looks like we have a couple more.
Okay. Bye, Lauren.
Yeah. There you go.
All right. Okay, so we've covered Georgian, federal, Greek revival, and the virtuous citizen. He's using the exterior of his home to loudly proclaim his devotion to the idea of American democracy, but not everyone is thrilled with the way things are going. So welcome to the Gothic revival. So the Gothic revival is generally found dating between 1830 and 1860. And it's a direct reaction to the ideas and concepts behind the Greek Revival style. So Gothic revival is comes from a gut reaction against the rule of reason that lay at the heart of the Greek Revival. Gothic was understood to be a collective synonym for imagination, faith, spontaneity, naturalness, all these qualities that they felt were neglected by the classical revivals. In the United States, the official establishment was revolutionary, and the ties to the immediate past had been broken apart and a new order had been established. While some, like Thomas Swan, were enthusiastic supporters, there were others who felt a loss. The Gothic revival, with its connotations of continuity with Europe, had an anti-establishment stance. So the style was used to defend and promote religion in general versus reason, more particularly the Christian Western tradition that some felt was being threatened with the secular ideas and focus on science and reason. The Gothic revival comforted the spiritually unsettled and those longing for the past world order. So that break with Europe, with England, was traumatic for some Americans, and this style felt comforting to them. So the Gothic revival style was popularized through pattern books, again, by architects Alexander Jackson Davis and Andrew Jackson Downing, who believed the style was best suited for country cottages. And what they're doing is really blending two separate architectural ideas of Christian symbolism and picturesque romanticism. And this is one of their house designs. So the best way to identify this style is to decide whether or not it reminds you of a medieval country church. That's kind of what they're going for, okay? So what you're really looking for are it's very pointy, right? That's the best way to think about it. Everything with Gothic revival is very pointy. So you'll have tall, narrow windows with thin tracery. Can you see the tracery sort of in those windows? You have barge boards imitating Gothic effects. Multiple gables, so again, all those points, all those different gables, wide porches. You have varied heights and massing. So everything we've seen before is very symmetrical and solid, and now all of a sudden Gothic revival, you have pieces kind of all over the place. Again, emphasis on gables all over, pointed arched doors and windows, right? So looking at, again, everything's pointy. Towers, you'll get sometimes crenellations, make it look a little castle-y. You get bay windows in this style. You get gabled dormers coming up out of the attic, paired casement windows, and a lot of leaded stained glass. So those are all features, again, country church, right? Medieval country church. So not only is the exterior different, but the interior is as well. So the Gothic revival is creating asymmetrical floor plans that allow for flexible room arrangements and create picturesque exterior massing. So they want to change up the massing, so they change up the interior. As with the Greek revival, some of these elements could be applied to older buildings if you want to update in the latest style. So it's really making that shift away from the classical Greek, Roman, and Renaissance architectural influences towards the picturesque, okay? So when you look, we kind of have one of the old classical styles, that symmetrical interior looks very balanced. And then you have the Gothic revival, and it's kind of all over the place, sticking out here and there. All right, so the Gothic revival, well, before we move on, any questions about Gothic revival? Yeah.
Did it start here or in England?
At both places, it was developing in both, but it appealed to Americans for the specific reasons of that, the break.
It looks like symmetry is kind of an option one. The first picture you showed of Gothic revival was not symmetrical. The last one was, this is symmetrical.
Right. So you can, again, it's up to personal choice. It is, even though I see what you're saying about the symmetry, it is kind of symmetrical, but it's also very pointy and the massing's all over. So the massing's not quite symmetrical. Any other questions? Okay. Gothic revival directly leads into the other 19th century Victorian styles. And the first one we're going to look at today is Italianate. So the Italianate style typically dates to 1840 to 1880. and really follows right on the heels of the Gothic Revival. So Gothic Revival starting up around 1830, Italianate comes in 1840. So all these pattern books and publications, as they're becoming cheaper, our styles are kind of moving a little faster, right? Because everybody's got access to this information and wants the latest and greatest in their new home. So the Italianate is drawing its inspiration from Italian rural architecture in Tuscany. So it's not the high classicism of Rome, but the traditional beautiful Italian villas of the countryside. And at the time, the style was considered a celebration of wealth, modernity, two characteristics that were really embraced by exploding middle class. So there was a huge market for this style. Now, this is what Morven Park looked like in 1861. If you've ever been on tour, we show this. So we can see the earlier, remember, here's our Greek Revival centerpiece with the old Georgian house inside and the two-story wings on either side. And this was changed over by adding this and then towers. And I'll go into more detail on that in a second. So pattern books, again, published by Andrew Jackson Downing, Samuel Sloan, and Calvert Vaux, popularized this style. These pattern books are being published at the same time and for the same audience as a number of advice books focusing on modern life and morality. So there's all kinds of books saying like, here's how you live your best life and you should have this house when you do it. Now, going back to Morven Park, Thomas Swan Jr., the second owner of Morven Park, is as devoted to the picturesque as his father was to the Greek Revival. So Swan Jr., if you don't know, he was a big politician over in Baltimore, Maryland, mayor of the city of Baltimore right before the Civil War, governor of Maryland right after the Civil War, and the U.S. senator for the state of Maryland. He really devoted himself to building parks in the city of Baltimore. What's the name of the one park? It will come to me later. Because he felt like if the citizens of Baltimore had a beautiful space to meander through and to enjoy things, their morals would improve. So he's really bought into all these ideas. So he gets Morven Park after his father's death in 1840. And again, he's living in Baltimore, just coming out here to Loudoun during the summer months. And so he goes a little Italianate crazy with his dad's Greek Revival mansion. Between 1859 and 1861, Junior builds the stone passages to connect here. So he gets rid of dad's colonnades and builds these stone passages. And then he adds Italianate towers all over the mansion. We get 4 on there. And then if you ever come out to Morven Park and walk the grounds, you'll notice a number of our outbuildings still have Italianate towers on them. So if the building was standing in 1859, Junior put a tower on it. He loved his towers. So many believe the Italianate style was so beautiful, especially when positioned in a park setting like the grounds of Morven Park, that by just gazing upon it, your morals would be lifted and improved. So I always joke that like Swan did this for us, right? Not just for him, so that we could all become better people and not just to show off how wealthy he was, obviously. So just a side note, Morven Park looked like this during the American Civil War. We had both Confederate States of America troops and United States of America troops camp on the property and write home about how their commanding officers were going up into the lookout tower. We know this story was accessible. I think this was just all for show. And they'd look across the Potomac River. These 2 towers were later removed. The 2 here are still on the mansion, but because the mansion's grown up like this, they're now kind of encased within the existing mansion. So, and the property was not damaged during the Civil War because Junior was a really good politician and slightly slimy, and declared himself a pro-slavery unionist. So everybody thought he was on their side. So I don't know how you do that, but he did. And so the house was not damaged. Now, how do you know if a house is Italianate? So just like Gothic Revival, we think pointy. With Italianate, we think vertical towery. Okay, so it's got to look like a tower. So with this building, you have overhanging eaves. That's a hallmark of the style with these big brackets. Okay, so right underneath the roof. You'll have sometimes a tall entrance tower. This one doesn't have it, but it is kind of tower shaped. You'll have paired elongated rounded head windows. This is very typical of the style. You can see a little hint of the Gothic revival in this window down here. You'll have a double leaf door, 2 doors to open up in the front door. And this is where a lot of the balconies start coming in. So balconies are popular with this style. So we can see these features both in the high style like Morven Park and in the less elaborate. So here at Morven Park, we start to get our balconies, the little balcony is there. We have the paired windows are showing up in our towers, those heavy bracketed eaves. You know, so he's adding it on to a house that started Georgian, went Greek Revival, and now Italianate. So this style is really common in urban settings because it works really well when you have a small urban lot to build that vertical style. So when you're walking around downtown Leesburg or other cities or towns here in Virginia and Maryland and throughout the region, you can spot Italianate pretty easily. It looks like a tower, has that shed roof going back, heavy eaves, brackets, and those paired windows, bay windows. That's all part of that Italianate style. So again, like Gothic Revival, massing tends to go more to the asymmetrical. So on urban lots, you'll have kind of just that square tower, but in houses built in Italianate, they'll kind of be a little bit all over the place and asymmetrical room layout. So it doesn't have to conform to that symmetry. Any questions about the Italianate style? Yeah.
So those 2 towers that are no longer on Morven Park, did you ever find any remnants of those? Because those are pretty big, so just like gone away and never been seen again. Or did you find any place where that material was incorporated in some other part of the building?
Yes to all. So the question is about kind of those 2 central towers that were taken down. Did we find evidence of them or have any pieces of them been incorporated? So I have been at Morven Park as the director of preservation since 2010. I was brought out in 2009 as a consultant, but way back in the year 2000, I was hired on a 1-year contract to figure out how Morven Park had been constructed. Nobody knew for sure what it was made out of, how it had been altered. So best job ever. And so if you think about how the mansion looks today, I was trying to go through the foundations and through the attic spaces to look for clues as to how it evolved and how it changed. And thrill of my career was this roof line is now up here with the portico. The record, we had this image in our collection, but everyone believed that because there were no massive foundations under this tower, that the towers were never built. This is an architectural rendering dated to 1861. So everybody said, oh, it's what he wanted to do, but the Civil War interrupted construction. So back then I was much skinnier and a bit more flexible than I am now. And I found an odd little wall up here in this attic space. And I squeezed between the wall and the rafters and I fell into this tower room. Like, I found a hidden room, right? Like as a preservationist and architectural historian, there was no gold in it, nothing very interesting. And I was stuck for 2 hours because it was before cell phones. And I had to wait for somebody to come looking for me and realize where I was. So through that, we discovered these 2 towers are still in the house. And actually, if you walk around the side and look, you can clearly see that tower. And then all of us felt really stupid that we didn't realize it was there before. When the mansion underwent a massive renovation campaign between 2005 to, I think we finished it up in 2012, 2013, when we built the visitor center. And when we did that, we had to this is now a 2-story section here, and we had to lift flooring in here to do some sistering work and reinforce it. And we found the timbering to support this tower going up. Also up in the attic space, you can see some plaster work and some remnants of what looked like a staircase that would have led up to this section. From the timbering we could find, we knew that Junior was doing something called balloon framing, which was kind of a new way of framing out. At the time, it uses lightweight timbering, and how it's built reduces the amount of weight coming down. So that huge foundation wasn't necessary. So we found it was balloon framing, at least from here on up. And I believe it was up here too. What we have in our current roof structure that was put on the house in 1886 is we have a lot of boards, like wood exterior cladding, that have a sanded painted finish, which would have been used to replicate stucco. So from the ground looking up, you'd be looking at, instead of a stucco finish, a wood board cladding finish painted with the sanded paint to make it look like stucco. So we believe when this tower came down, they used elements of it to create that roof. This is the only one I haven't found yet. I know it's there. I need a really good water leak in one specific spot so I can open up plaster or pull up flooring and prove it to myself that it is where I think it is. If you're ever on a Morven Park tour, you go into the governor's bedroom on the second floor. He has a bathroom with a shower. I think that's our tower. So, well, we'll see. Yeah, I just need a good excuse to kind of rip it apart. But any other questions? All right, so from Italianate, let's see. Okay, next style is Second Empire. And it's also known as mansard style, which is the name of the roof type that this style uses. So this is popular roughly from 1860 to 1890. Now, this style is looking to France and the rebuilding of Paris under the reign of Napoleon III, which lasts from about 1852 to 1870. So during his reign, the new Parisian residences are large and built for the affluent homeowner along wide avenues marked with monumental buildings and statues. These new residences, pulling on stylistic elements of the Italianate, are capped with the mansard roof. Well-attended exhibitions in Paris in 1855 and 1867 helped the style spread beyond Paris to England and the United States. In the US, the style is seen as a statement of wealth, modernity, and fashion, especially the new mansard roof. So, named after the 17th century French architect Francois Mansart, the mansard roof creates a usable, light-filled attic space. And this makes it a popular style to use when people are remodeling an older home to create more space. So you can sometimes see older homes that are converted to Second Empire by the addition of this roof. Because if you go from this, where you may have to duck on the sides, to this, all of a sudden you have a whole nother usable story. So the key stylistic identifier is the mansard roof. If it's got this kind of roof, it is a Second Empire house. But other elements, as you can see, are similar to Italianate, and they'll include the dormers. We kind of have an entrance tower type thing there. Your decorative eaves with your paired brackets are popular. Paired columns and pilasters, and then towers are either placed symmetrically or asymmetrically and have their own mansard roofs. Any questions about Second Empire? Okay. Okay, now as we move into the latter part of the 19th century, we get to another American classic, the Queen Anne. So the Queen Anne style is popular from roughly 1880 to 1900. You see how our years are getting shorter as we go? And it's the culmination. It's really, the result of everything, of all these picturesque movements that were started by the Gothic revival back in 1830. So Queen Anne is what you get when you take bits from Gothic revival, Italianate, and Second Empire and put them in a blender, throw them up on the house, right? So you'll recall that I mentioned that the Georgian style is the type of house that most young children will draw if you tell them to draw a house. Well, Queen Anne is our standard American spooky haunted house. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. But if you want to identify Queen Anne, does it look like a haunted house? Now, this style was popularized and named by British architect Richard Norman Shaw. The name Queen Anne is a little bit misleading. Anne was queen from 1702 to 1714, a time during which the classical and Renaissance revivals were at the height of fashion. The Queen Anne style created by Richard Norman Shaw was inspired by the English architecture of the late 16th and very early 17th centuries. So that's what he's kind of looking to. In 1875, the British government constructed several houses in Shaw's Queen Anne style for the Philadelphia Centennial. The style was an instant hit with Americans, and Queen Anne style homes began appearing throughout the country, including here in Virginia. So besides just knowing it looks like a haunted house, if you want to identify a Queen Anne, it is not symmetrical in any way, shape, or form. It is all over the place. You do get more steeply pitched roofs. So again, kind of that pointiness from the Gothic revival is showing up there. And then these late Victorians, you know, there's mass production of materials. So you are getting wall surfaces covered with a wide variety of materials. You may have stone or brick on the first floor, wood on the second floor. You get all kinds of decorative shingles. They really didn't like a plain surface, like just decorate it all. So everything, there's no plain flat walls, everything's broken up with towers, bay windows, overhangs, you know, railings, whatever you can think of. There's stained glass windows, beveled and leaded lights, again, pulling from those earlier styles, wraparound porches, conical roof towers, projecting bays, and hipped roof lines, okay? So you've seen all that up here.
What's a hip line?
A hipped, okay, so a gable goes straight across like that, a hipped goes like this, so straight in the middle and then like its corners are clipped.
So what is the key difference between Queen Anne and then just general Victorian? Is this a subset of Victorian?
So yes, the Victorian really covers everything we've talked about since Gothic revival up till now, because it's the reign of Queen Victoria. So yeah, here in America, we tend to call the Queen Anne style ones Victorian. That's how we know them, which if you say Victorian, people will know what you mean. But as an architectural historian, the proper term for the style is Queen Anne.
Does the color change?
They love, so questions about the color on Queen Anne, they love colors. So you will see all different kinds of colors used on Queen Anne. Often they'll paint, like this one is pretty over the top with the pink and white, but you'll also see ones that have multiple different colors of trim and, you know, each story's a different color, like it's just an explosion of everything. So they love all that. Okay, so this style is short-lived, right? We're only looking at about 20 years for the Queen Anne style, but it's really impacted us as Americans in our imagination. So by 1920, these houses had fallen out of fashion and were viewed as ugly monstrosities on the American landscape. Think about how we think about McMansions today, right? Or like those massive sprawling houses for no reason, right? That's how people were thinking about Queen Anne's by 1920. So these houses were linked to the Gilded Age, which was a period of greed and corruption in American history. Critics referred to the style by the 1920s as desolate, ominous, and haunted. And that perception stuck. And with the 1930s and the growth of the idea of Halloween and haunted houses and stories, the Victorian Queen Anne haunted house became well established in American psyche. So we've got a regular Queen Anne, and then that is the Adams family house from the early Adams. So you can see exactly how it is definitely a Queen Anne style house. So the Queen Anne style is really the big finale of the picturesque architectural movement, right? By the time it's done, everybody's over it. And the result to it resulted in the creation of 3 new styles, all of which emerged during the same time and are much more toned down. And those are the bungalow, colonial revival, and the Foursquare. Before we get into those, are there any questions about Queen Anne? No? All right, moving along, bungalows. So we're going to take a look at bungalows first. They're popular from roughly 1900 to 1930. And this is one style that most Americans can easily identify, and chances are you've been inside one of these at some point in your life. Bungalow houses are part of the arts and crafts movement found throughout America at this time, thanks to companies like Sears, Roebuck & Co. and the Aladdin Company, who sold bungalow-style house kits. These were built all across America. So the style has its roots in India, where buildings called bungalows, or variations of that word, have been built for hundreds of years. The bungalows, we know them, were first built in India in the mid-19th century by the British as an informal, easily constructed one-story building where travelers could rest. Due to the hot climate, the building sat low to the ground with wide overhanging eaves to keep the interior in shade, and porches to allow you to sit outside and catch the breeze. The American bungalow house first appeared in California, but soon spread throughout the nation. Described as a house reduced to its simplest form. Remember, they're like looking at that Queen Anne and being like, oh no, we are going to tone this down. It appealed to Americans who support the arts and crafts movement, who were looking for homes that were simple and harmonious within their natural landscape. And the bungalow was also economical, meeting the needs of young families, and they began spreading up in the newly created suburbs, right? This is also the era that transportation is developing and people are able to live outside cities and commute in. The Craftsman bungalow was a popular variation on the bungalow form, featuring details that emphasize the construction element. So when you think of Craftsman, it's all about showing off the craft, right? So that's what you're going to look for. So bungalows are characterized by these low silhouettes, right? They kind of sit low to the ground. They're typically 1 to 1.5 stories, not usually higher than that, and between 2 to 3 bays wide, right? This one's just got kind of 2 bays, but most of them are usually 3. They have these deep overhanging eaves, right? And back to India, keeping it in shadow. And you'll see brackets or rafter tails. This one's got full rafter tails sticking out. And they have a broad, deep porch with corner pillars that are usually tapered, right? So you can see these pillars start out larger at the bottom and tapered to the top. We also call those battered, means the same thing as tapered. You're also getting concrete blocks coming in at this time. So you see that a lot used in foundation work where they form the concrete blocks to look like what they call rusticated stone. So kind of a stone form. And that's what you see there. Bungalows are also unique in that they are really our first houses with an open floor plan with interconnected rooms. So there's no entry hall. The front door just opens directly onto a living room. And the interiors show off the natural materials and construction. Okay, so you're seeing exposed beams and stone chimneys and things like that. Rustic cobblestone fireplaces, exposed beams, built-in cupboards, bookcases, and window seats. Your typical bungalow house contains a living room, a dining room, a kitchen, and 2 to 3 bedrooms, and then eventually a bathroom. So again, perfect type of home for a young family. Any questions about the bungalow?
The exterior supports on that porch. I've seen them many times. It's pyramid shaped.
Mm-hmm.
And where did that come from?
So those are just stylistic choices with how you want to carve your. You mean at the top of the post, like going up the stairs, having that little pyramid?
Yeah, the ground up. Stone or brick, would come up like this. And then you have a column and go up above that. Support from the porch.
Okay.
But what I find curious is why the pyramid shape? And in contemporary architecture today, we'll see that same video repeated. They always call that craftsman style.
Mm-hmm.
But who was the craftsman? Where did he come from to go? Why not just a plain pillar?
Right. So the question is about the pier foundation, which is where it's not a solid continuous, but piers being like tapered as they go up and then supporting a column going up, like especially on the porches, like you can kind of see here, we've got pier foundation with some lattice in between. So it is a craftsman style choice. Again, it kind of goes in with the tapering and of the columns above it. There's no real structural reason for it, except you just need to have a support there, and they just wanted to make it look like that and stuff like that. But again, craftsmanship, these type of houses with the craftsmanship was showing off the craftsmanship. Now, Sears and some of those other companies hired people to design each of the elements. So I don't know for sure, but I would assume that design came out of one of the companies. So we don't know who, besides being able to maybe track it to one company in particular. I don't think we know who the craftsman was because these were so mass produced.
If you're familiar with Tacoma Park, Maryland, that neighborhood is filled with that design pyramid type design. I don't know why, but it just sticks in my mind.
Well, and often you have like, you could order from Sears and you have these pattern books. Or you can go to your local contractor who's building these and he'll be like, you don't have to order it from Sears. I got all the stuff and I can build it for you. And so you'll end up with those. This is also the time period in Tacoma Park, Arlington, all the kind of DC suburbs where you're getting developers creating a subdivision for the first time. Because again, we've got the trains coming in and out of DC and, you know, transportation's easier. And so you may have had a developer for that neighborhood and you know, who hired one contractor and wanted, you know, 3 designs, just like our subdivisions today.
There's a section of Richmond is taken with Egyptian architecture from the
Yes.
1920s. I
Yeah.
don't know whether it came us too, and I don't know all of that, but I don't have it.
Yeah, it is. So, you know, at the beginning, I showed you that huge poster of typologies. There's a lot of small little ones that like flare up and then go out pretty quickly. And that's one of them. But you don't encounter them very often. So I didn't include it. Any other questions? All right, so next up, colonial revival. So this style is still ongoing today. So again, because we love those Georgian federal houses and that Greek revival, all those colonial types of things. So this style is still popular today. The colonial revival style was born during the centennial in 1876 at the Philadelphia Centennial and continues to be constructed today. This was a year of celebrating 100 years of America. And so the colonial revival style was a look back at the architectural styles popular in the decades following the American Revolution. Okay, so we're celebrating 100 years. We're looking back and we're saying like, hey, we should start building like that again. That was cool. So I described the Queen Anne style as putting all the picturesque styles into a blender and then throwing the mix up onto a building. Colonial revival is more like pulling a few key pieces out of a grab bag filled with elements from Georgian, Federal, and Greek revival with a bit of New York Dutch mixed into it. And that's what you get. So colonial revival style homes feature porticos, fan lights. You can see, you know, we've got our portico, we got our fan light, we got our side lights. Let's see, I keep losing myself here. Pedimented doors, windows, panel doors, dormers, multi-pane windows, and we go back to the symmetry massing from the exterior. The interior doesn't necessarily retain symmetry, but the exterior does. So, and this is a colonial revival home that was, of course, featured in the movie Home Alone. Now, Morven Park fits here too. So, between 1880 and 1886, Mary Mercer Carter, the daughter of Thomas Swan Jr., removed her dad's Italianate towers and returned the Morven Park mansion to her grandfather's Greek revival. Okay, so she's the first of the Swan family that decided to live at Morven Park year-round and raise a family there. And I can't imagine the chaos of that house with those towers, because Swan Senior with his portico and Junior with his towers, it was all about what you see from the exterior. Mary's trying to raise a family year-round in this house. She's got to make it work. So she returns it to the Greek revival of her grandfather. So to kind of understand, let me see, okay, so to kind of understand what she did. So this is Morven Park as her dad had it. And what Mary does is she removes these 2 towers, uses them in the construction of the roof. And then here and here, she raises up the roof. So now you can walk across the 2nd story without going up and down 2 main stairs. We have a little staircase up here, but so she's making the house functional, going all the way across. So this was smaller wing and she raises it up. She creates the 2nd floor here. So it puts it all under one roof. Here's our tower on one side that's behind a false wall, and our little tower on the other side that still survives on the house. Center one's gone. The other one I think was back here and just shortened down, used as a bathroom now. So she's really part of that colonial revival, taking it back to the Greek revival. Let's see.
Chimneys are interesting too.
Yeah, aren't they gorgeous? So she put those in as well. We know the mansion had chimneys during this phase and earlier, but the architect just left them off. I guess they didn't look as nice. But she redoes all the chimneys, and she wonderfully has all her contractors sign, the trim in the room. So when we had to redo some of these rooms where we know she had done work, we pulled off all the trim and everything was signed October of 1886. So we know the trim goes on last, right? So we know everybody was finishing up in October of 1886, which gave us a great date for the work. So again, she's hitting the Greek revival right in time for that American centennial celebration. Another form of the colonial revival is the Cape Cod house, which again shows up all over America. These small 1 or 1.5 story houses, you can clearly see part of that colonial revival. It's got that exterior symmetry. You've got your 3 bays, very just nice, neat little house. So it's harkening back to that colonial revival with some elements like around the door and things like that. It's more simplistic. Any questions about that colonial revival style? And you mentioned realtors, like so many houses are like colonial, and it's actually colonial revival because it was built after 1886. Any questions at all?
Was that in Cape Cod during that same period or?
So the Cape Cod's coming in shortly after, and the Cape Cod lasts a little longer. I mean, we're still building variations of the Cape Cod today. Yeah, so these are all like the middle classes booming, suburbs are being built, and so everybody's building new. So one last style to note, because it is very common here in Loudoun and the surrounding area, it's called the American Foursquare. And it's defined by the form of the house rather by any stylistic attachment. So even though these do have like some exterior styles in common, it's really the form of the house you're looking for it to be a foursquare. So builders in the early 20th century referred to this house type as a truly American modern home. It was designed to serve middle-class families in suburban settings. So it's usually 2 stories in height and 2 bays wide, 2 or 3 sometimes, but mostly 2, with a 1-story porch across the front. So that's pretty much universal. There's usually a front-facing dormer piercing the hipped or pyramidal roof. Okay, so when you have the little line going across the top, it's hipped. If it comes to a perfect point, it's pyramidal, like this one's almost pyramidal. To tell the difference between hipped and pyramidal. The floor plan is divided into a living room, dining room, kitchen, and a half-depth side passage. And then the second floor typically has 4 bedrooms and a bathroom. Okay, any questions about the Foursquare?
And the geographic location that you find it more than others?
It's throughout the country. I mean, this is another pattern home that's going, you can see like Sears Chelsea House and Harris, you could go on, not online, you could go through the catalogs, order your house, have a local builder put it together. A lot of people believe they have Sears houses, the bungalows or the Foursquares. It's actually not as common as it was originally perceived. If you think you have a Sears house or a mail order home, look in the closet under the stairs. That's usually where the marks will survive. Other marks may have been removed, changed, painted over, things like that. Closet under the stairs, best place to look for it. But what we found is that because these houses, like all the information was out there about them, a contractor would build one using the kit and then could build 1 million more just using their own source materials. So this is just built throughout the country. You see it in, everywhere except probably the really hot states where maybe you don't want a 2-story house.
So
Okay.
I'm not clear on the Sears house. I've always heard about it. I've actually seen one in California, but what was Sears doing? They were selling the floor of the architectural plans to
They sold a
builders?
kit. No, you could order every single bit of your house and it would be shipped by train as a kit. And then a builder would assemble it for you.
Including kitchen, sink, bathrooms?
Everything. Isn't that cool?
How much, any idea how much they cost at that
Oh, gosh,
At the time, wasn't it like 10, 20,000? It wasn't.
no, I mean, that's a fully constructed house. I think the kits were more like 800 to 1,500. I mean, they were really, and you know, it depends on which model you get and things like that. They were really designed for those, you know, young, middle-class
Starter
families, starter house, yeah, what we would call starter house, people living in their whole lives. You know, and you could order, you could customize some of the features, they'd pack it up and ship it to you by train.
And they were sitting on a flat, surface. There were no basements or anything like that.
No, some had basements and they would, yeah, they would include the basement and the foundation for it and, yeah, you get just. For
You can
looking at
still order
catalog.
kit houses. You can still order kit houses. My in-laws built a kit house.
Really?
It was a while ago, but there are companies that, and you don't have to have all the interior stuff. You could just have the exterior of the house and everything gets delivered on trucks now, not trains.
Like prefabs.
Mhm.
or-
No, they built one that was like all the lumber was pre-cut and labeled what goes where. It was not a prefab.
So
They
you have
put
the
it
land,
together.
you have your own, construction person. And that's it.
You could get prefabs now, all different. I mean,
Yeah.
like a crazy amount of selections.
And there's all kinds of kits too, with all kinds of new materials.
Where you have a contractor put it all together and it's all labeled where everything goes, like a big puzzle.
Yeah, we're talking about kit houses still being sold today for everybody.
Are the two Sears houses that are in Leesburg really Sears houses?
I don't know. I wish Lauren was still on, because she would know. I don't know off the top of my head.
We
Yeah,
have a question here. Is there a name for the early exposed timber houses / buildings that are around Leesburg? And do you know where I could find more info on them?
like the log houses. I don't think there's any timber frame exposed timbering. So I don't. The town of Leesburg has done a lot of work in architectural surveys of downtown. Years ago, I worked for a firm and we came out here and we expanded the historic district boundary. Yeah, and Balch, I think, has a lot of that information. So you could always, if you were interested in a particular house, you could look it up here. But I do know when the town was first laid out, if you bought a plot, you had to build of a certain size within a certain amount of time or you lose that lot because they wanted they wanted the town to develop quickly. So I know some of the houses, like I believe the Loudon Museum Log House is one of those early houses.
On the wall.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And that one's been moved, right? It's not in its original location? Okay. There's probably more that have been engulfed by later additions and changes in downtown Leesburg. But I've never gotten to do a full survey of Leesburg.
And similarly, I believe a lot of the houses on King Street South were built for railway workers, I heard at some point.
Could be, because you do have like, when you look at, and we're talking about housing on the south side being built for railway workers. So when you look at old towns and cities like Leesburg, you really, you have it divided into quarters and you have your wealthy quarters and then the quarters for those who work for the wealthy, right? Because everybody's walking everywhere. So you will have areas, sections of the town that are, you know, the smaller housing, smaller lots, and then other sections that are huge lots and enormous housing. And so it would all kind of work together. So you would have the people who owned and employed and the employees all within one community. Any other questions?
The lady online just added that she lives near an exposed timber near Stumptown that's allegedly circa 1782.
Okay, yeah, very cool. Check it out. Yeah, you don't see many surviving exposed timber framing, and if I'm understanding or right, I'm kind of thinking of a medieval timber framed house with some kind of nogging in between. But they could survive and they could be encased in later houses too. So that's pretty cool. And those would, you know, people can build, like, we're looking at main styles, like main popular stuff. But anybody can build whatever they want to, you know, and pull from older styles or whatever. So not everything always fits nicely into one of these categories. All right, y'all ready for a pop quiz? Okay. I'm sorry, that's a Foursquare here in Leesburg. Okay, it's not. All right. I'll give you a second to look at it, and then I'll ask you to raise your hand if you think you know what it is. What style is this house? And this house has been changed a lot since I took this picture. Okay, we got 2 people who think we know. Maybe anybody? Okay, who wants to yell it out?
Queen Anne.
Nope.
Gothic.
Gothic, yeah, Gothic revival. Yeah, and these get tricky because they do rely on each other, but it's pointy. Remember the pointiness for Gothic revival. Okay, 1 point for you. Oops, the clipper. All right.
Italian.
Diana.
Yeah. You guys were so on it. You just yelled it out. Yes, this is Italianate. That tower, the overhanging eaves, the brackets. It's all just yelling Italianate at you.
That's getting remodeled now as well.
Is it?
Yeah,
The
where
whole
is,
thing.
that's the Glenfiddich
That's
house.
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah, I took this, I've been doing this presentation for years.
Where is that one?
I live on this street and every single house has been.
Oh, where is it?
King Street, North King Street.
North?
What style?
Bungalow?
Mm-mm. 2.5 stories, so it's too tall for bungalow.
Yeah.
Foursquare?
Yeah, Foursquare. Foursquare. So this is your typical Foursquare, 2.5 stories, your front porch across the front is always the dead giveaway for that Foursquare.
And on that Foursquare, can the front door be either in the middle or to the
Yeah.
side?
Yeah,
It
that
doesn't
threw
matter.
me off. I thought Foursquare was always completely symmetrical. So
Mm-mm,
I've
no.
not heard that front door could be.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear. The front door can be anywhere on a Foursquare. It's more that you kind of have that sort of, like, they're nice and tidy. They look kind of balanced and then that 1-story porch going across the front. All right. How about this one? It is Victorian, but which one of the Victorian styles?
Queen Anne.
Queen Anne, yeah, it's Queen Anne. And you know it's Queen Anne because, like, there's the shingles on there, there's the, you know, it's not quite symmetrical, you got your bay window, but the decorative shingles usually give away that Queen Anne style. And again, you know, what I was showing you guys as examples was kind of like the epitome of style. And now what we're seeing is how that's interpreted with people who actually have a budget.
So are these homes that you're showing us, are they all in Leesburg?
They're all here in
My
Leesburg.
house is the one on the left.
Okay.
It's also Queen Anne, but you can only.
You can only see a little bit of the side.
That's my neighbor Scott. Scott, that's it. And they're all on North King Street.
I went walking one day. Okay, how about this one?
Bungalow.
Bungalow, absolutely. Yeah,
Landscaping.
a lot of landscaping on this one. I think I took these pictures well over 10 years ago. Yeah. I should go out and do an update one day. Okay,
Cape Cod.
it is a Cape Cod. What style is the Cape Cod part of? What movement? Do you all remember? Colonial Revival, that's it. So it's little Cape Cod's a Colonial Revival. I always think this one's just so sweet. I had a great aunt who lived in a Cape Cod, down in Florida. And I swear that house looked like it should only contain 1 room and a bathroom from the outside. And when you walked in, it was enormous. Like, it was the weirdest thing. I don't know how that house did it, but it's pretty cool.
That house has an elevator in it.
Does it?
It does.
Maybe it was probably like my great aunt's house where you're like, how can you possibly fit anything in here? And they worked well. Okay, how about this one? Victorian, Queen Anne, yeah. And even that, like, we've just got a little bit of the decorative shingles,
Yes.
right? The rest of it's kind of plain, but asymmetrical, and then, you know, these random dormers and different things popping all over it, so
That's on Cornwall, you're out walking.
Yeah.
Cornwall,
And Ward Street.
and their gardens are gorgeous.
Yes, they are. This is the house my eldest daughter wants to own in Leesburg because it's pink, or at least when she was 5, that was the one she wanted. She's 15 now, so I'm sure it's changed, but. Okay, how about this one?
The French. Mansard.
Has the regular gable roof on there. I know it's a little tricky, because of the steepness. Federal, it's federal. Yeah, and it's federal because of the fan light.
Yeah.
Okay, so you got the 5 bays like the Georgian, but it's federal because it's got that fan and side lights, but mainly the fan light.
Question.
Yeah.
In what period do shutters show up? In the early Georgians, we don't see it. And we go forward and somewhere in time, shutters start to adorn all the windows. And then in some places you'll see lower houses, the shutters were operable and they had characteristic wrought iron brackets to hold the shutters back. And so they, in bad weather, they can be closed. They can turn down and close the shutters. But where do you see the beginnings of shutters?
So that's a really good question. The question is, when do shutters begin to appear? I don't know for sure. But I know they're there by the 18th century in most houses that survive today, right? And I say that because we're working with the surviving building stock we have today to understand it, but we also know, like, you'd look at the surviving building stock from 1710, you'd be like, oh, everybody had brick or stone houses. No, those are just the ones that have managed to hold on this long, right? So there is, you know, unless there's archival evidence for things, there can be little gaps. But by the early 18th century, we're seeing the interior shutters. And as glass is more as precious, you start to see the exterior shutters, and then becomes just like a feature to have either interior or exterior shutters or both as you move through the 18th and 19th centuries. Now, of course, shutters are mostly decorative on houses that you build today. But as he said, the shutters were, interior shutters would help keep out the light. Also provide a little extra insulation from cold and wind coming in through those wood windows. Exterior shutters could be closed to protect the windows from flying debris during storm. In fact, at Morven Park, we still close the shutters if we're expecting some kind of really bad storms to come through. We'll move furniture away from the windows and go close the exterior shutters to help protect the house.
It's curious as well is that the original shutters or the colonial shutters, what people call, were set out from the windows to accommodate the hinges to close and open and the brackets that held. Fast forward, at what time, I don't know when, but we get into plastic shutters that are screwed onto whatever the base is. And it's the difference between the two houses. The older house is much more attractive because of the depth that it shows. It gives to the house as a warmer effect, it seems to me.
Yeah.
The cheaters, which I call plastic shutters, never seem to be consistent in design. In fact, in some places now we see no shutters at all.
Right.
There's a subdivision that has stopped construction in Great Falls, right across from the shopping center. If you're going down Georgetown Pike. And here's half a dozen or 8 enormous square footage houses. But I haven't seen a shutter yet.
Yeah.
And it's bland.
Yeah.
I don't know why the project is stopped.
Well, and you know, that transition, talking about shutters, the old historic shutters versus the modern, like just pasted on shutters today. Glass is not so precious, you know, and it's, we have insurance. And, you know, just kind of that demand for working wood shutters has disappeared. I would still love to have working wood shutters. There was a slight resurgent. Do you remember, some of those wood blind shutters came back for interiors? Maybe 10 years ago or something, they got real popular. I was really happy to see those, although good Lord, the dusting. But you know, they've just fallen out of style and they're not necessary, or we're told they're not necessary anymore. I would love to have shutters on my house.
Are you talking about like plantation shutters?
Yeah, that's what came in like 10 or 20 years ago or something.
Alright,
They were
don't
real
say those
stylish.
are out of style, because I'm still very much using.
No, they're not, but they came, like, there was, all of a sudden, they were like commercials nonstop on TV for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they were great. Okay, we've got one last one. This one's a little tricky, on purpose.
Oh, I definitely.
What do you think?
It could be anywhere, so.
Maybe Georgian or.
Yeah, Georgian, it's Georgian. So, Georgian, we were looking at kind of the high style example of 5 bays. This is kind of Georgian cut in half for a smaller urban lot. But you still want that style. So instead of a central passage, you have a side passage going back to front. You can tell it's not federal because we've got this. We do have like this transition, right? So we've got 6/6 up above and then 9/6 down below, which you'll sometimes see too. So we've got kind of the older windows and the newer windows, because remember, federal, Georgian was 9/9 typically, and federal moved to 6/6, but you will see both in both styles. But yeah, this is a little Georgian, so a little tricky on that one.
It's that same window right there. That.
Above Anna?
Fire alarm.
It could be.
These photos
Yeah.
are supposed to have all been houses that were in existence as of the Revolutionary War.
Oh, cool.
That's what
Well,
this photo exhibit is.
I can believe this one is definitely up. By then, this is an early Georgian. Okay, so that is the end of my presentation. Does anybody have any additional questions? Yeah.
Does the chimneys have anything to do with the type of architecture it is? As far as
Not-
placement of chimneys?
No, placement doesn't really matter except you'll see symmetrical, like trying for symmetrical, sometimes with Georgian and federal, they'll try to be at each end or central or both. And then sometimes with the higher style Victorian ones, you'll get more decorative chimneys, you know, that are kind of swirling around or patterned or whatever. So they'll kind of play in with whatever style the building is, but placement, no, that's usually dictated by the interior room arrangement. So again, if you've got symmetrical room arrangement inside, you're gonna have symmetrical chimney placement. So they fit hand in hand, but I wouldn't look at the chimneys to define the style. Yeah.
Could you tell me where Tudors fit in, like a Tudor style home?
So a Tudor style home is often, I believe that's a Gothic revival. Although, no, let me stop myself for a second. So you're talking about Tudors from the 1930s, right?
Yeah.
The Tudor revival, okay.
With all stripping on the outside.
Yeah, so it's one of those subset, that's kind of a colonial, part of that colonial revival movement that really, the Tudor revival comes in kind of around in this area. We're really seeing it. I always think of the 20s and 30s. I did a lot of surveying in Arlington with a lot of Tudor revivals that, and I know Maryland, like right outside DC, the suburbs there have a lot of those. So yeah, that's kind of looking back at that Gothic revival and stealing elements from it as part of that overall colonial revival movement.
Over the top.
Yeah, we do have a few here in Leesburg too. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, thank you all so much for coming out. I appreciate it. Have fun walking around downtown.
It's a nice day for it.
It is, isn't it?
Very good.